Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from March 21st to the 27th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, but then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. And we're going to start with this article from Forbes highlighting that U.S. cannabis sales could top $72 billion by 2030, says leading researcher. So who is this researcher and why do they claim this? As U.S. cannabis sales is estimated to rack up a whopping $57 billion by 2030, according to a top researcher. But hold up, that figure could top a whopping $72 billion if the 18 additional states that seem likely to legalize activate their markets. As these stunning projections are the latest made by New Frontier Data in its new report that analyzes the current U.S. cannabis economy. So do keep in mind, while this report might make a lot of claims, it doesn't mean that it's true, and these are still projections. So key findings, the reports include self-reported usage rates have risen sharply since 2012, and if sustained, the number of U.S. consumers will grow from 47 million in 2020 to 71 million by 2030. That's a fairly significant increase. While the U.S. medical markets continue to expand, with the number of registered patients forecast to increase to 5.7 million in 2030, which would then just represent 1.6% of the adult population. And if you can just imagine what percentage of the US population currently uses opioids as their first pick for medicine, and they could potentially switch to a non-addictive alternative that could work better, there's just so much more of the population that could be brought into that medical cannabis market. While assuming legalization in all 18 potential markets by 2030, 47% of total demand would be met by legal cannabis purchases, up from 27% in 2021, indicating continued disruption of illicit markets. And then lastly, despite strong state level momentum, the near-term prospects for federal reform are dim, but a limited measure like cannabis banking reform is possible following the 2022 midterm elections. Well, firstly, I don't think anyone knows this, but unfortunately we can see that New Frontier Data does not seem to be as bullish as some other people are on the SAFE Banking Act passing before the 2020 midterm elections, which is a damn shame because obviously many in the cannabis industry would benefit from SAFE being passed as soon as possible. But if you want to get a copy of the report entitled 2022 U.S. Cannabis Report, Industry Projections and Trends, you can click here. But isn't it fascinating that we get to the end of this article and it turns out that Forbes is acting as a sales funnel for a New Frontier Data email opt-in campaign? And while obviously you can just unsubscribe after you grab the report and look through it, I do find that fascinating that we are seeing media outlets becoming less of an informative source and more of a sales pitch. And I do truly wonder how much New Frontier Data paid to get that headline in Forbes. And why is SAFE important? Well, we've been through this many times, but just wanted to reference this opinion piece in the Seattle-Times, How to Stop Potshot Robberies. Allow stores access to banking. As simple as that. And the sad reality is that the SAFE Banking Act has the votes from both Democrats and Republicans to pass out of the Senate and become law sooner than later, saving many lives in this industry. But sadly, it's criminal Schumer who chooses to work for big pharmaceutical companies who pay him to delay anything cannabis related in the name of social equity, as opposed to working for the American people that voted for him. So keep making noise and reaching out to your state reps and senators if you can to support SAFE in the America Competes Act. But the good news is that more organizations are paying attention, as the Human Rights Watch has put out this article as of March 22nd, U.S. should end cannabis prohibition. And while we all are aware of this, I'm just glad that the momentum seems to be building, as Congress should pass the MORE Act again to help reduce the harms of criminalization. So it's just good to see that the Human Rights Watch is taking note of the MORE Act coming into the House of Representatives next week and being voted on. But on top of that, I wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison, as he shares from this Washington Post article, Biden's drug czar is finalizing a broad strategy for the addiction crisis, which I think is wise, because as opposed to gallivanting across the globe and trying to save the whole world, why not focus on some big issues that are happening in your own backyard and finally address them? As we are working diligently to make sure we get it out as quickly as possible because of the urgency that we and the president have placed on this issue. But it's almost laughable to see the words diligently and urgency used to describe how the Dems could possibly act, because at least from my perspective, from the outside looking in, for the last 14 months, the Dems have been diligently working towards doing absolutely nothing besides possibly destroying America from the inside out, and it's about time that they act with urgency to address the opioid epidemic, especially when they ran on the promise of decriminalizing and descheduling the best alternative solution that we have. But instead, what have they done for the last year? They've spent most of that time promoting a not so safe and effective big pharmaceutical product. Interesting. I guess we really know who the Dems have been working for. And the irony doesn't stop there, as this one comes from a Barron's article highlighting that TLRY, Sundial, and other Canadian cannabis stocks are buzzing when the U.S. House will consider decriminalization. So while this has likely gone from funny to straight painful for a lot of us longs over the last 14 months, do keep the faith because I believe we're getting closer, as cannabis stocks rose Friday after the House of Representatives said next week it would consider a bill to decriminalize cannabis. And because of that, Canadian cannabis stocks spiked on Thursday following news of next week's potential vote and were mostly extending the rally on Friday. And so this included TLRY Brands, stock up 14%, while Sundial Growers gained 4%, Canopy Growth 5%, Aurora Cannabis 6%, and Kronos Group 3%. All companies that do not benefit whatsoever from the MORE Act passing out of the House or through the Senate or becoming a reality in the US. And so for that reason, it does lead me to believe from the past, I've seen this happen, that this could have been a sell the news event on Friday, and then on Monday we're just going to see them fall back down. I don't know, but I choose not to play that because I'd rather be a long-term investor and not worry about the day-to-day volatility. But that is the reality. There's one more snippet out of here that, since I can't read it, but I did copy and paste it earlier this week. This comes from Cantor Fitzgerald analyst Pablo Zuanic agrees, suggesting that leading Senate Democrats could likely not afford to come out empty-handed on pot legislation after bringing so much attention to their reform proposals. The analyst estimates that in its current version, SAFE could garner a little over 60 votes in the Senate. While he says a little over, we've had a few other investment firms say that SAFE has 70 votes in the Senate to pass right now. But he adds, SAFE could be more than just face saving. SAFE passage could be an honorable start and provide a realistic spark for the future, broader, more comprehensive reform, Zuanic wrote in a research note on Friday. And while I don't typically agree with Pablo, I think he's right in saying that. Well, we've got this great visual from Grizzle Media to highlight the ridiculousness of what we saw at the end of last week, because when a cannabis legalization bill is introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives, we get a totally normal market reaction where TLRY, a Canadian cannabis operator, jumps up 44% in 2 days, yet MSOs, which tracks the US operators, which for the most part are doing double the revenue of Canadian LPs in cannabis alone, was only up 4%. The only word I can leave for this is incredible as well. And so I do want to share this one, though, from Jungle Java to highlight that MSOs is still doing fine, as there was a nice inflow of in-kind shares and cash for the Advisor Shares MSOs ETF today as of Friday to end the week. Here are the changes made to the holdings for March 25th, 2022. And so despite we're not getting the love that TLRY is getting because they trade on major US exchanges and they can get the access of capital from institutions, what is good to see is that MSOs increased their cash position to $19.4 million end of day Friday from $4.8 million to start the day as of Friday. And while MSOs might not be getting the love that TLRY is getting from institutional investors and traders just yet, we are getting more cash, which is all we could really ask for to end that last week. And it does go to show that the demand for US cannabis is there and it is still growing. So I wanted to share this one from CNBC's Fast Money as they give their take why cannabis stocks ended the week in green. And this again comes after the news that the House could consider an act decriminalizing cannabis on Monday.
Cannabis stocks finishing the week in the green. TLRY, Aurora, Canopy posting gains for a second day after the House said it will consider the MORE Act to decriminalize marijuana. The MJ Cannabis ETF also finishing the week up more than 15%. After a year of big declines, after a big week for cannabis, can these names keep flying higher? Tim, just earlier this week,
M&A. Yeah.
M&A. And
yeah.
you said that any sort of like federal move to decriminalize or, all this, that's not a reason to invest.
I just believe that there's growth. There are real companies. They are going to get that tailwind. The ones that are the bigger ones are getting bigger in the case of Cresco and some of the other names. And the deeper the moat gets for these companies, the more you push away other big companies, I think the better their businesses are. The addressable market continues to grow. New Jersey had a vote this week, a little disappointing. They're going to be in the game in a very big way. We know about New York. This week was about M&A. It was about near the end of earnings season where you've reset expectations. I think the MORE Act is through the House, folks. You need to see Senate approval to get cannabis legal in this country. What you did have, though, was the Senate approved a research bill unanimously. So the fact that the Senate is agreeing to look at the plant, to study the plant, to give the FDA, and I think this gives a lot of constituents within the Senate an olive branch to get back in off the ledge. That's what the market saw. And so you saw the Canadian names. TLRY was up 54% this week. Canopy growth is up almost 60% in 9 days. It's the names that people can buy, not necessarily the U.S. names that had the big week. And again, I think some of that is short covering. And that alone, it's not fundamental, but that's part of a change in character here. And a lot of these stocks now are actually well above their 50. These were big volume moves this week. Let's see.
But Tim brings up an important point. You can't invest on them hoping that it's going to be federally legalized tomorrow, because I don't even think it's going to get in front of the Senate. Unfortunately, there's two. It's not because they don't want to. I don't even know if it's going to get out of the House. I don't think the people that are supporting it even agree on how to get it out of the House.
And so just wanted to thank Tim for his snippet. And while this guy might know a lot about other industries, I think he's just talking out of his ass there because the MORE Act has passed out of the House many times. Inside the weed legalization bill, the House of Representatives just passed December 4th, 2020. And then we've got this one from Drug Policy Alliance. House Judiciary Committee passes the MORE Act. This came out of the committee, and then I believed it passed the House again. It might not have passed, but this is from September 30th, 2021. So just to highlight that while that guy says that, it's going to get out of the House, without a doubt. But again, he is right in saying that the Senate is the main obstacle. So just wanted to share some updates as Tom Angle shares this. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said that despite regulators' delay on voting to let medical cannabis dispensaries start selling recreational cannabis, the launch of sales is still only a matter of weeks away. And so that means that regulators will meet again on April 11th, that special meeting that was recently added. And at that meeting, we will likely see what we did not see last week, what we were all expecting, that New Jersey CRC will launch adult use for certain MSOs that are already selling medical that have enough supply to supply the market. They will give them the green light to get going. And so just wanted to share the snippet from Todd Harrison, adding from New Jersey, from the director of New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, Jeff Brown. Our goal is to work with the industry. So at the very next CRC meeting on April 11th, and again, this is a special meeting that was recently just put on the schedule. It wasn't even there before. We have a cohort of ATCs that are turnkey to launch this market here, simply pending a vote by this commission. And obviously, I guess it's up to the commission, but it seems like the pressure is on and they're going to have to turn that key and make that a reality. And so I wanted to share that bit. Plus, Dennis Rudev shares another bit on New Jersey. Just if you want to learn about it, this piece is by Cantor on New Jersey. And so you can pause to read. In New Jersey Minute, anything can change. No. Investment summary, it seems New Jersey rec sales may start by mid-May, and that would require an approval on April 11th, and then just a bit more info so you can pause to read. Adding at least New Jersey can still beat Massachusetts, as apparently it took Massachusetts longer to launch their program after voters voted yes in 2016, while supposedly we may have good news as soon as April 11th, which we're all banking on, and what may happen on April 11th. So you can pause to read. Well, I wanted to share this one from MJ Stock Trader out of certain states as Dear Cannabis Prohibition States. You can either have a regulated cannabis market where you can collect taxes or have an unregulated black market and collect no taxes and waste money on cannabis law enforcement. Michigan gets it. So just wanted to share the snippet from the Treasury as adult use cannabis payments to be distributed to Michigan municipalities and counties. As the Michigan Department of Treasury today announced that more than $42.2 million will be distributed among 163 municipalities and counties as part of the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Cannabis Act. So you can pause to read more details, but again, these are the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition in your state. And this is from that same article from Marijuana Moment, as Michigan sends $150 million in cannabis tax dollars to cities, schools, and transportation funds as officials approve first social consumption sites. And I imagine this is what every resident of the states wants to see tax dollars being used for. And this is why you end prohibition. So just wanted to share one snippet out of this. That's more than 4 times the level of funding that the state paid out to municipalities with cannabis tax dollars last year. So just to highlight, this industry grows, and obviously with that, so does the benefits to the citizens in your state. And so we jump to this one, the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for Florida. Looking at this past week, no new dispensaries were open from March 21st to the 25th. But if we take a look at the qualified patient count, Florida increased their patient count this past week to 699,334, which represents an increase of 3,348 patients week over week, which we love to see, as again, that number is picking up as we head out of winter. While if we look at dispensations from March 18th to 24th, we can take a look at the milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower sold for all of the MSOs competing in Florida. And so you can check week over week whether they're selling more or less, and to see how they are keeping their market share and competing in this very competitive state of Florida. And so lastly, wanted to share this one from Cannabis Biz Times, as apparently Pennsylvania's medical cannabis director is calling on dispensaries to lower their prices, as the state's wholesale dry leaf cannabis prices dropped 37.6% from January 2021 to February 2022, while retail prices only dropped 10.1% during the same time frame. Interesting observation, Pennsylvania's medical cannabis director. How about legalizing for adult use? I imagine that would have a big impact on driving the price of retail down. You might want to consider that because I think most people in your state want it. Even the lawmakers are working towards it. And so this one, Cannabis Business Times news out of California, as California senators introduces bill to create tax credit for cannabis dispensaries. As Senate Bill 1336 establishes a carry-forward tax credit for licensed cannabis dispensaries equal to the amount of the following business expenses, according to an announcement from Wiener's office. And so sorry, I jumped ahead a bit, but this highlights Senator Scott Wiener's Senate Bill 1336 would establish a tax credit equal to the amount of several qualified business expenses. And so what this would allow allow employment compensation, safety-related equipment and services, and employee workforce development and safety training. It's sponsored by the United Food and Commercial Workers. Western States Council SB 1336 recognizes the difficulties that commercial cannabis retailers face currently right now with a very difficult illicit market to compete with, and provides a hand to a unique and important part of California's economy, according to Wiener's announcement. So there's more information if you wanted to pause to read. But just to highlight some of the other changes California has, or some of the changes and steps California lawmakers have taken to try and make the lives of those in the cannabis industry easier. Additional tax policy reform has been proposed by Senator Mike McGuire, who has introduced a bill that would end California's flat rate cannabis cultivation tax starting this year on July 1st, and then Sonoma County, which has approved a measure to slash local cannabis farmers' taxes by 45%. That's huge, but if that's only for Sonoma County, it'd be great if we can implement that for other counties as well. So I wanted to share that one out of California. Well, we've got this one out of Rolling Stone, just to share a snippet of this, how legal cannabis could revive southern economies. Of course it can, because ending cannabis prohibition is good for economies. It's a very good thing. And just to highlight that, it's funny when you look at Rolling Stone as a cultural icon over the years, but then they want to add this in the beginning. Opinions expressed are solely those of the author and do not reflect the views of Rolling Stone's new editors or publishers, as they were bought by a new company in 2017. But I wanted to share this one snippet that highlights one of the many ways southern states could benefit from ending cannabis prohibition, as at its roots, cannabis is an agricultural commodity. It must be harvested, grown, and cured or processed with care, and the South excels in agriculture. Plus, many of the South's traditional leading commodity crops have seen declines in pricing over the past few decades. So while each state's current top crops bring in a sizable revenue, cannabis has the potential to simply increase these returns and add to what the state already has going for itself. And so lastly, wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison. Thank you, Todd, for sharing this snippet, as Anson hedge funds subpoenaed by the Department of Justice in a short selling probe. So we love to see this, as we could see some of these Canadian hedge funds actually be held accountable for some of their predatory short selling approaches that they've been carrying on. And so I wanted to share this one from Champ Z. This is just for anyone who needs to catch up, a write-up on Moaz Kassam and Anson funds, a tale of corruption, greed, and failure. But I wanted to share a snippet from this Bloomberg article that highlights this. So we just love to see that this awareness is getting out there, and I hope the DOJ goes at them hard, as hedge funds with 45% returns drawn into DOJ probes of short selling. Anson funds has been growing rapidly from its base in Toronto, and it's among firms said to receive subpoena in a broad U.S. probe. And so let's just go down to the snippet on shorting cannabis stocks. Otherwise, if you want to read the whole thing, it'll be below. But let's see what they have to say on shorting cannabis. Anson is named for British Admiral George Anson, who rose to fame in the 18th century by embarking on a perilous circumnavigation of the globe. Ships in his group were lost to the seas, but along the way he got rich by capturing a Spanish galleon laden with silver. The firm's headquarters features a large wooden map tracing that 4-year voyage, as well as one of the Admiral Anson's quotes, "Prudence, intrepidity, and perseverance." Almost seems like steal what you can get and then call yourself rich. The firm is officially registered in the Cayman Islands, surprise, surprise, and has an outpost in Dallas. But being in Toronto has its advantages. Several years ago, a stock bubble formed in Canada as investors bid up shares linked to its nascent cannabis industry. With banks reluctant to provide much support to the sector, Anson was among money managers that helped startups raise money. It also bet against them, and that should be outright illegal to do that. But on some occasions, people with knowledge of its operations said Anson engaged in a controversial practice of betting that shares of cannabis companies would fall, and later participating in their secondary stock offerings, sales that often trigger price drops. The Globe and Mail reported on the strategy in 2019. Canadian regulations are looser than those in the US, making it easier for investors to legally use discounted shares from such an offering to finish up or cover earlier short sales, said Paul Davis, a securities lawyer in Toronto who has sought more stringent rules for short sellers. And I don't know if this is the same rule of naked short selling, but I do know that naked short selling is illegal in the US, while in Canada it's still illegal. So this could be the same thing, or it could be another practice. But nonetheless, just goes to highlight that some of these hedge funds in Canada do manipulate the share prices, and these are some of the ways that they do it. We don't have the outright prohibition that exists in the US, said Davis, a partner at Macmillan, but securities regulators are considering a proposal that would bar such trading, he said. So we love to hear this, as obviously all of the pain that we've gone through in the last 14 months, we don't want it to be all for nothing. And obviously it won't be if we can stay patient, stay invested, and keep accumulating shares in the very real and fast-growing companies that make up the US's largest emerging market that no one even seems to know about. And that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.